The Nova collection is quickly becoming one of the most confusing while also being one of the most interesting that they have. Thank you, GameSir, for sending the Supernova for review. It's already been unboxed because I've been using it for quite some time, this one. We'll cover everything, rest assured. And yeah, let's just jump right in. Here we have the controller. Everything that comes included in the box. I'll just put it on screen right about now. Before we go any further, there are two other controllers that are called the Nova. You have the Nova Lite, which has been for the longest time one of the value kings because of its overall reliability, performance, and price point, which is very low. And then at the same time as the Nova Lite, they also released the Nova HD. And that was a controller that was very close in price range. A lot of feature that was in the Nova Lite was also in the Nova HD, was definitely more Nintendo Switch centric by having HD Rumble and other extra features. But it didn't have analog triggers, for example. It's digital. We have the Supernova. You could think that the Supernova is, as is on display here, just a product that is designed to be superior to the other two controllers. And in most regards, I would say that yes, it is the case, but it's not as simple as that. It's kind of a little bit of the two put together. If you own the Nova Lite or Nova HD, you'll be happy to know that each of these two controllers came with a case. The Supernova does not, but it is fully compatible with the cases from the previous controllers. So if you'd like to store it that way and you have either the Nova Lite or Nova HD, you are free to do so, which is pretty cool. And shout out to ChocoAL14, who's also a creator on YouTube, that actually asked that question and prompted me to test it. And indeed, it does work. So we have some kind of rubbery grip, not quite so rubbery actually. The feel is very nice. You have it in the front and the back. You have your two back paddles. You have a switch for your modes, which is pretty cool and something that is not all that often with GameSir controllers. Hair triggers, switch, so they're analog this time around, but digital also. Membrane face buttons, very nice feeling, very springy. Not the quietest membrane there is, but I find on average membrane is definitely manageable in the bedroom.
Yeah, boy.
A membrane D-pad, and that was one of the big benefits of the Nova controllers compared to almost every other GameSir controllers, because their D-pad tend to fall flat a little bit. Well, I'm happy to say that this one goes back to membrane. If you're familiar with the D-pad on the Nova Lite and Nova HD, that's basically what you have here. We have Hall effect sticks, membrane shoulder buttons. Of course, we have our analog triggers, which also have hair trigger. And this is not a digital button once you put the hair trigger on. It is a software corrected, distance shortened type of hair trigger. Not really any dampening. I don't think there is. There seems to be a mechanism that stops you from going deeper, but there doesn't seem to be dampening per se. And when you take off the mechanism, you do feel a little bit of dampening at the end. Your extra paddles are tactile, and of course you have your pogo pins for your dock, which once docked, this is what it looks like. Super nice RGB that goes around the controller that reminds me of a heart. They sent me the blue one, but they also have a white and pink one, which in my opinion looks best. I do think the darker one lends itself a little nicer to RGB. They're gonna be selling faceplates. Unfortunately, I won't have them in time for the review. They should arrive after I leave for vacation. So I'll be making a short once back from vacation and I've taken possession of the faceplates, which I'll probably put in the description. If we remove the faceplate, there's another feature that is hidden with this one. Of course, you can change your sticks if ever you would want to replace them. We can see the modules here. The face buttons can be swapped if you prefer your Nintendo layout or if the standard layout. So you have the ability to play like this. It also looks very nice when you remove the faceplate. The buttons are prone to falling, so you cannot really use it that way, but it's kind of cool if you want to see your RGB in action. The faceplate itself is magnetized, the buttons are not. That already is a feature that you don't have on none of the two Novas. And then of course you have your dock. By the way, the dock can also serve as an antenna. You're able to put your dongle in the back. And when talking about dongle, the Nova HD did not come with a dongle. The Nova Lite did come with its own unique dongle that I'm pretty sure it's the only controller that uses it. The dock, all in all, is another feature that is specific to the Supernova. So we already have two upgrades over the two previous models. And then of course, if we compare it to the Nova HD, which when you even look at the way that it's built, we're looking at two controllers that look very similar. One of the biggest difference is that you have the RGB around the sticks here, Whereas on this model, the sticks are not RGB, but they're these replaceable rings that you can buy separately with GameSir. They sell these if you want to change your color, or if for some reason it gets scuffed over time and you're looking for something that has that anti-skid quality that you lost. You're able to buy replacements to replace them, and then you can just sit it back in and sit it back on your controller. There are a lot of advantages that this controller has, and a lot more that we still haven't covered. But one big thing that is lost, HD rumble. Now, I don't think I've ever seen a GameSir controller that does not have great rumble, and that is not the one that will change that notion. Thankfully, the rumble here is very nice, very well implemented, albeit rotary style. You don't have trigger, but in terms of the grip rumble, it's like your Xbox controller, whereas the Nova HD is more like your Switch and DualSense controller. That's a little bit of a step back. We have a fair amount of upgrades if we think about it. We have the hair triggers, we have the switch for your modes, the dock, you have the ability to change faceplate, swappable buttons. So anyway, not a big deal, right? Well, there's a few more things, and of course we'll go over. And to do that, let's move to my computer where we'll look and test all the intricacies of this controller. I'm sorry in advance as you may hear noise behind me. There's nothing I can do about it, so my apologies. Starting with the software, there's quite a few things that we can do in there. On your splash screen, starting upright, your icons, the first one is update, which is what you saw at the beginning. The second one is to reset your settings to default. The third will be to test your buttons. And the fourth to go back to the introduction screen. You can address your RGBs, which you see your changes in real time in the software. A nice little touch I really like. Going top right, you can adjust your motion, your gyro, and the software is quite extensive. There's a lot of options in there, anything you could need really. I find the response needs a little bit of work, but GameSir told me that they're working on it, and it's still very usable what is already there. I do believe that there are better options out there, so I'm looking forward to GameSir catching up to those other options. But as far as just tweaking it to your liking, everything you could need is in there. Then you also have extensive options to address your sticks as well as your triggers. And lastly, you can address your buttons completely. I made a video about a shift layer recently that does not exist on the Supernova, but as far as just making every button do whatever you want, it's absolutely there. Going into Steam input, everything works as it should. On Switch mode specifically, rumble does not, and the extra paddles are not perceived as unique buttons. So they're all managed from the onboard memory. You will not be able to manage them from Steam input, regardless of the mode you're on. Gyro works fine on both the PS mode and Switch mode. Your RGB are not addressable in Steam input, but again, you have the GameSir software to do all that. I tested the D-pad in Street Fighter. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. This is amongst the better D-pads we've seen from GameSir, especially for fighting. Extremely responsive in terms of inputs, very comfortable for long-term plays for platformers as well. Overall, it's a great implementation when it comes to the D-pad. I'm excited for GameSir, specifically the G7 Pro that will go mechanical, but until then, this is pretty much the best we've seen from the company. I brought it into Celeste to confirm everything was working great. No misfires, no wrong diagonals, everything was clean. And also a game that I benchmark often, Run, everything was great, extremely responsive, great experience. When looking at sticks, Hall effect is something that I am stepping away more and more over time, but if there's one company that has impeccable tweaking in terms of their sticks, GameSir is definitely one of them, one of the few actually. And I almost came close to the scoring that I get on the Cyclone 2 and Tarantula, more around 34,000, but with the Supernova I was able to reach scores such as 33, 32, for the most part very good quality sticks. And of course I did some further testings. There were no snapback at the axes, there were no dead zones really when addressed. Here are the circularity. On the left is your raw, and on the right is your circle if adjusted, which you can address back and forth in the software. Although it is not captured, it had a little bit of snapback, fairly common with Hall effect. There were no algorithm preventing any snapback at all. And for the triggers, no dead zones, very well tweaked, very well tuned, and you really feel the graduality, so all good there as well. If you want to look at your step resolution, here it is. Now on the Switch, I went ahead and made sure that the turbo worked in terms of shortcuts, and indeed it does. You can hold your M key and a button to turbo or remove it altogether. I also tested on the Steam Deck where it worked. Rumble also did not work on the Switch. but gyro did for both the PS mode and Switch mode. And one thing I found surprising, I don't know if it's a hint of the future to come with GameSir, but I noticed when using the dongle that usual X input appeared as X input in Steam. However, it was the input at the root level. Is that a hint to a future wireless controller for Xbox? I mean, it kind of sounds like it. Maybe I'm reading something where there isn't, but I think that's a hint, because usually the dongle mode has X input, and now it was the input but perceived as X input, and there is some wizardry happening here that I don't quite understand. Just know that when looking at the performance, which I'll put on screen right about now, X input simply not exist on that controller with dongle, and the fact that you see dongle in the input, that could be the indication of some licensing happening in the background. Time will tell, but until then, here are the performance. For the most part, you have like reliable modes on every connection type, but surprisingly enough, that's not a controller that reflects what we've been experiencing from GameSir recently. The best modes are still doing great, but the other modes, not as much. So I was a little surprised about that. Anyways, let's move towards the conclusion. At $45 US, is that a controller that I can recommend? It's almost impossible not to be able to recommend a GameSir controller. I just think it's not the controller for me. And that's where I have a bit of a conflict, because it's not a bad, that's the thing. It's not a bad controller. There's not a world in which I could say this is. It's not as much of a deal as some other controllers. Like for example, I think the Cyclone 2 at a $10 difference is a considerably superior product because it has that much more feature under the hood. It has TMR sticks. It has a nice ergonomic. While I still like it here, I find that the overall ergonomic is better on the Cyclone 2. The RGB is better. The looks, I guess, what I'm trying to say is while this controller is not basic, it's just not what I have come to expect from GameSir. They don't make controllers for me, they make controllers for everyone, and thankfully they have so many options that's pretty much impossible that you won't find something to your liking. And maybe it's this one, or maybe it's another one. I just don't think it is the controller for me. And sometimes, some of the controllers that aren't for me, they kind of still sweep me up my feet because they have a price point that is amazingly good, that it is nothing short of outrageous. Well, I don't think it's the case here. I think the price is more than fair, but I don't think it's outrageously good, which is what we had seen with the Nova Lite, which is what we had seen with the Nova HD, and what we have seen with a controller like the Cyclone 2, dare I say even the Tarantula. It breaks so many molds that even though it's priced higher, it shatters what it goes up against on its own market. And if I think of the market that this is we're just one level under what I would consider a controller to be pro. And with that in mind, I think the price point is more than fair. At this point in time, they still haven't shared that detail with me. There will be coupons, which I will put in the description box. But all in all, the question is that a great controller for you? If you're not necessarily looking to play the Nintendo Switch with it, which it can still do just fine, by the way, I think it's a better controller than. To me, Supernova is an upgrade over the HD. I just feel like it kind of missed the mark with that by not having HD rumble. And also if we look at pulling rate overall, the Bluetooth performance, it just wasn't on par with what I'd want for an all-around controller. If you're looking for a Switch controller first and foremost, the Supernova does not manage to overtake the Nova HD. And that's where I kind of wish it was built a little different. But if your focus is PC or phones or tablets more, well then, this one definitely takes it over the Nova Lite. It's also tuned in a way that it will not make the other two irrelevant. Maybe in that sense, it's designed perfectly to enter the market while not disrupting the other two, because you get the Nova HD for less than $30 US at regular price. If you're looking for a Switch controller, like that's what you want to get. The features it has are cool on paper, but they're not going to be as impactful as what you'll have on the Nova HD, because the Nova HD has that immersive layer that makes a world of difference. And on the other hand, if your single target is to have the best quality per the price you paid, the Nova Lite still takes it over. So the Supernova asks you a little bit more to give you a little bit more, which ultimately I think its greatest strength lies in the software that you have on PC. But if you take one of the other two, you also have the mobile app that you can use to tweak them. So it's not like you're left with no options at all. You do have options, just maybe not as convenient as just popping open a software on your PC. By the naming scheme, I feel like it should be kind of the successor of the other models, and in a way it is not really. It's almost like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You have baby bear, mama bear, and papa bear. Sometimes you'll want the bigger bed, sometimes you'll want the smaller portion of food, and sometimes you'll want, I don't remember the story, but you know, you catch the deal. You catch my drift. Yeah, okay, you know what? I don't know where I'm going with this. Thank you very much for clicking and watching the video. Thank you, GameSir, for sending the Supernova for review. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and the subscription button with the bell to not miss any future content. I'm Clef. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.